The number one problem plaguing e-commerce apparel brands is profitability, and most brands have no idea how much they should be spending on their growth. Today, I'm going to show you what the Goldilocks Zone is for your MER, also known as your marketing efficiency ratio. Profitability is the number one issue concerning e-commerce apparel brands, especially right now in this market. A lot of brands are struggling, and I talk to brands every week. Some of them are doing 100 million a year, some of them are just starting out, and still profitability is the number one issue. Now, I love sharing some of the insights that we learn in working with these brands, and I'm hoping that you can learn something here in terms of taking your brand to the next level. So I'm going to walk you guys through how to use MER to assess how much you're spending on your digital ads and how much you should be spending. And I'm going to walk you through how we've developed this methodology of the Goldilocks Zone, where you can really assess where you should be in terms of your marketing spend and how you can still attain growth while keeping your profit in mind. And towards the end of the video, I'm going to show you a few ways that you can implement and bring down your costs, increase your profitability, and get that MER right where it needs to be for your brand. All right, let's dive in. So what should my MER be? Basically, this is asking, based on my total revenue, what percentage of that revenue should I be spending on my digital media? So first of all, what is MER and why does it matter? MER is a high-level metric that we're using to see how much we're spending on our marketing and is it generating enough revenue for the business? It's not specific to new customers or returning customers. Now you might be asking yourself, am I overspending or am I underspending on my marketing dollars? There isn't just one right answer to this. Essentially, this is really a spectrum in terms of profitability. Now, we've seen it all with brands. We've seen brands that are spending 70%, yes, 70% on their digital marketing as a percentage of their total revenue. And obviously, that's way too high. You're never going to be profitable like that. Most brands are only profitable if they're doing between 10 and 30%. But we've also seen brands that are doing 4% as well. And so those brands that are only spending 4%, they're just not growing at all. And the brands that are spending 70%, they're not profitable. So there is a Goldilocks zone, and I'm going to show you guys what that is. Now, in terms of what's the average, commonly we're seeing that brands are spending anywhere between 10 and 30%. Sometimes brands do spend more than that, but really, like if you're spending more than 30%, you may not even be profitable at 30%. But high growth companies or that have a lot of capital to back them up, they may be spending more than 30% if their product margins allow for that. But most of the time, we see that brands are spending anywhere between 10 and 30%. Now, we do see that brands want to generally be in that 15 to 20% range. This is where you're finding kind of a balance between profit and growth. Now, I'm going to walk you guys through a few different scenarios to demonstrate what does this look like based on my revenue and my profitability, and how does that impact things like new customers or returning customers. Now, we're going to start with scenario one. You can see here that we're going to start with 5% MER, and I've got 6 different scenarios here going all the way from 5% down to 30%. And I wouldn't recommend spending more than 30% because that's likely going to be way too much and likely not going to be profitable for you. But in some cases, when you're starting out with your marketing, you just haven't dialed it in yet. And it's possible that you might be spending more than 30% and you're trying to get that down to under 30%. And we've seen that quite often where brands come to us and they're looking for help on how to bring their MER down. So I'm just using $100,000 in terms of revenue because this just gives us a nice even number when we're looking at these examples. So if I have a 5% MER on $100,000 in revenue, this means that my media budget is essentially $5,000 while my total sales are $100,000. Now, what does this mean for our ROAS? If we were to assume that all of our customers are new customers, right? So let's say there's no returning customers, then what's going to happen is basically what that means is that 5% MER means I'm going to need a 20x ROAS to maintain a 5% MER and have growth, right? So how sustainable is that? Well, it's very unlikely that you're going to be getting a 20x ROAS, right? We know that within our ad accounts, it's much more likely for us to get like a 2 towards like a 5x ROAS. And if you're getting a 5 or more, you're doing really well. But achieving a 20x ROAS is very unlikely. That's a real edge case. So for most brands, you can't really use a 5% MER and grow because you're not going to be hitting a 20x ROAS. Now, if you're spending 5%, you're really going to be in stagnant growth and high profit because this assumes that most of your customers are going to be returning. If you're doing 100K in revenue, likely the vast majority of your customer base is going to be returning customers. And so you will have high profit, but you're going to have very stagnant growth. You're not really going to move off that 100K. So if you're stuck at that 100K point and you're asking yourself, why am I not growing? It could be that you're just not spending enough on your media. Now, moving on to the 10% scenario, you could see here for 10%, you'd be essentially having a $10,000 media budget. And that basically would require a 10x ROAS to maintain that. And you're likely going to have less returning customers. Now, this is really a low growth position with high profit, but you're starting to get into that Goldilocks zone. Most brands that I've met with, if you're doing a 10% MER, you're very happy. But most brands are happy with 20% as well. But 10% just means that you've got that extra 10% in terms of profit. And that's a very good position to be in. Now, as far as that Goldilocks zone goes, really, we're talking between that 10 to 20% MER. And if your brand cannot maintain a 20% MER and be profitable, I think you need to be looking at other scenarios within your business that might be causing you problems. If you're finding that 20% just isn't sustainable, it could be that your product costs are too high, something's not right. Maybe your pricing needs to change, but your business model is not set up to be profitable. So you need to really take a look at your operations. Now, if I'm doing 15%, that's really balanced growth and profit. And if I'm doing 20%, that's also balanced growth and profit. You can grow fairly substantially by spending 15 to 20% on your media, and you can still maintain a good profit. So this is where most brands want to get to. As I mentioned before, some brands that come to us, they might be spending 40% of their revenue on media. They might be spending up to 70%, if you can believe that. And so what we've done is we've helped those brands bring that down to within that Goldilocks zone of the 10 to 20%, and then we keep it there sustainable. Now, if you get down to a 30% MER, this is more of a situation where a lot of new brands find themselves because they haven't established themselves yet in terms of their processes, in terms of their brand. And because they're new to the market, they don't know exactly how to sell yet. They haven't figured out the perfect product market fit. So ultimately, you're going to end up having a lower ROAS. You're going to have higher cost of doing business with your marketing. Now, when it comes to your returning customer percentage, what you're going to find is that the more you spend on your media, the lower your returning customer percentage is going to be, right? Because you're acquiring new customers, and the more new customers you have in percentage versus the returning customers, the lower your returning customer percentage is going to be. Now, for high profitability brands, we find that the ideal place to be is between 35 and 45% returning customers, which means that you're getting a large chunk of new customers coming in all the time, but you also have that increased profitability from those existing customers that are coming in. So if you find yourself in a position where you have, 10% returning customer percentage, either you have a problem with not getting enough returning customers, but it could also be that you're a new brand and you're spending a lot on your growth, but you could also be overspending on your growth as well. So it's important to look at your returning customer percentage and make sure that it's in the right place. If you're over 50%, you're probably not spending enough on your marketing dollars, on your media budget. And in that case, you probably are going to have a very low MER as a reflection of that. But I'm going to show you a few ways that you can bring down your MER and fix this in short order. Okay, so let's go over some ways to reduce your MER. Now, for apparel brands, it's a little bit different because you're going to have a different cost structure than some of the other e-commerce brands out there. But generally, apparel brands that are doing 45% or maybe even 50% in terms of cost of goods, you're going to be happy with that, 10 to 20% MER. Now, if you find yourself in a position where you're overspending on your MER and you need to bring that down fast, here are some ways to do that. So number one, the fastest way to bring down the MER is simply by cutting your media spend. So, if you're doing $100,000 in revenue and you're spending 30%, which would be the $30,000 media budget, and you're finding that's just not profitable and sustainable for you, the thing that you need to do right away is you need to cut that budget down to a level that's sustainable for you. Now, is that going to impact some of your new customer acquisition? Yeah, it will a little bit, of course. But if you cut in the right places, right, then you're going to be able to sustainably bring that down and not lose too much of that additional revenue. So on to my next point here, which is attribution. If you are cutting your campaigns, you need to know where to cut. You don't want to cut from your most profitable areas. And sometimes these ad campaigns can be misleading in terms of what's actually bringing those incremental sales versus what is just looking very nice in the campaign, in the account, right? So a couple ways of doing this is within Meta, you can use your attribution. So look at your 7-day attribution, look at your 1-day view attribution, compare those in terms of ROAS and see what's actually driving incremental sales. And if you have the ability on your new campaigns, try to use an incremental sales attribution method. You can also use third-party platforms like Triple Whale, where you can combine your platforms to see which of your platforms are actually driving those incremental sales for you. So before just doing like a deep cut to your budget, try to figure out where are my new customers coming from, where are my incremental sales coming from, and then try to cut in the right places. Now, other ways that we have brought down MER in a sustainable way is by increasing the ROAS. So the two easiest ways to do that is one, segmenting your catalog to focus on the best sellers. So we see a lot of apparel brands that are using a full catalog. And for remarketing, that's okay, right? Because we want people to see the products that they're interested in based on what they saw on the website. But what you want to be doing in your Google accounts and in your Meta accounts is you want to be segmenting your catalog into different product sets. So for example, new arrivals, you want to be focused on your best sellers. If you have 100 SKUs, but only 10 of them are A-grade products that are selling really well, you don't want to be advertising all 100 of them. You want to focus on your top sellers. And that's really going to drive up your profitability and your conversion rates in terms of those campaigns. On the Google side, you're going to want to separate your PMAX campaigns into separate product sets so that you have budget control. Because again, if not everything's going to sell in the same way, if you set up multiple Performance Max campaigns with different product sets, you're going to see that some of them might have a 5x ROAS, some of them might have a 2x ROAS. And then what you're going to want to do is just spend on the higher performing ones. So again, this is another way of shifting your budget into the high performing areas and bringing down the cost overall. Now, the other way is, of course, you can improve your creatives. This is the one thing that has the biggest impact on your ROAS overall is your creatives. So if you've done all the other things, you've separated your product sets, let's say you've got your catalog optimized, then you really probably want to focus on having new creatives. I would recommend make sure that you have something that really speaks to what makes your product unique. Make sure that you have creatives that are really illustrating what makes your brand unique and not just the style, right? We know that if there's features and benefits beyond just the style, that's going to sell a lot better. But in some cases, you might want to do things like promote all your different colorways. If you've got multiple colors, people like to buy in different styles and colors. So promoting different colors and just trying lots of different visual variations of your creatives is really going to help on that side. So if you find yourself in a position where you are spending way too much on your media, and if you're spending that 30% or more of your total sales on your media, look at how you can cut that down. You're going to need to really focus on your profitability to make sure that you can properly grow your brand. So if you're finding yourself in that position, these are the ways that I recommend you break that down and start to optimize that and bring your costs down. But other than that, if you're looking for professional help, if you're looking for somebody to support you on this, definitely send me a message. I'd be happy to give you my opinion, do an audit, and let you know what the best path forward will be. Now, I do videos like this once a week. So if you like the content, if you're an apparel and footwear brand and want to follow along, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.